Yeah, it's working.
Alex, you're ready. Tony, you're ready.
Yes.
As
Okay,
ready
so
as I can be.
okay, that's great. So then let's start. And Chris, we can go on with the live streaming. Thank you.
We're live now.
Okay.
Okay. So,
Tony, the floor is yours.
Oh yeah. So
Yeah.
okay, I was waiting for my cue. Okay. Hello everyone, and welcome to the. This is the second, right, Zaina? The second GLS. Yep. And so again, thank you very much, especially in these times that we're in. But at the same time, it's really wonderful, and I've been trying to take advantage of the virtuality of this GLS, in the present moment to be able to expand our audience and our artists and everything. So right now, people can tune in, and hopefully they will from anywhere they are. So I'm really trying to take advantage of that. I will tell you a little bit about it. Today has been a very hectic day for me. So, but at the same time, and what I'm addressing is that I'm not as prepared to read that bio thing, but at the same time, sometimes I've hated that thing. And in this particular moment, I would like to just throw it out the window because I have a long relationship with this artist, Alexandre Arrechea, and I will tell you a little bit about it and take it from there. Uh, I met Los Carpinteros, the collective, in 1999 in New York City. Uh, and it was Carlo McCormick, the art critic and uh, kind of like popular cultural critic, that told me, you got to meet this collective, you got to meet these guys. And I met them. And what happened was that it reignited an incredible need for me to reconnect with the art of Cuba. And just listening to them and what they were talking about, I was really interested in a common language that I think was happening, and a lot of similarities and between the San Francisco Art Institute and ISA, the art school in Havana, and particularly Rene Francisco. There were kind of like these philosophies about pedagogy that were really overlapping. So I just had to go. And then we jump a little bit because I want to make it brief. And in 2003, 4 years later, Haga left the collective and went on to become a solo artist, which was, I could only imagine at the time what an incredible challenge and incredible thing that would be. It would be like, you know, someone in the Beatles doing a solo career, and it did happen. So, but I think we had a lot of conversations, and I was really trying to be there for what Alex was going through and that amazing step that he took. It took a lot of guts, in my opinion, to like leave his comfort zone and all the success commercially and otherwise that he was experiencing. So that was really an incredible thing for me to watch. And so I invited him to come to the Art Institute in 2003. And he was freaking out. Like, Tony, I don't even know what I'm doing right now. And I said to him, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, I said, that is exactly why you should talk to the students,
that
because
was
these are like experiences and moments in an artist trajectory that is what these lectures are all about, is what talking to younger artists is all about, that is ups and valleys, is successes and failures, is struggles, is how do you get through it. And I think at that particular moment, I really wanted Alex to share this kind of vulnerability And I'm sorry if I threw you into the into
No,
the
that
fire, but
that was the best
I
situation.
remember that just to listen you at that moment and what you were going through, I get it from the feedback that the students were telling me. It was really a beautiful moment, and I want to thank you for that, because it's not just about success. I think it's also beautiful when artists share their struggles, you know, and that is really an amazing thing for young artists, you know. So thank you for that. Now we jump 17 years later, and here you are, and it's incredible. Your career has just taken off. You're such an incredible, successful international artist. Tons of biennials that you have participated in. Your kind of cosmopolitan international approach to it by being not only bi-coastal, but Madrid, Havana, Miami, this kind of like international thing that you are now carrying with you is like, I think, another reason that I really been like keeping my eye on you for so many years. Uh, you know, you can look it up, and I think that I hope that you read the press release that Zaina and Nikki sent out, and you can see all the biography and everything and the CV of Alex and what an amazing career. So what I just like to do is just really say thank you so much, Alex, and especially in these times that we're in, for agreeing. And I know that you're not doing this for money. You're
No,
doing this because you're supporting us and the San Francisco Art Institute. And
absolutely,
I appreciate that very much.
absolutely.
Welcome, Alex. Alexandre Arrechea.
Thank you, Tony. Wow. Yeah, 17 years later is unbelievable. You were right. I still remember that day when you called me. I was in Los Angeles, and you called me, Alex. What are you doing? And I say, I don't know. I'm trying all different kind of stuff here, but I don't know where I'm heading to. And at the time, I was like, ruminating on so many different things, but mainly I was trying to understand who I was, because I have devoted like the last 12 years working with Marco Andago. Basically, for me, the idea of the collective was my identity. I couldn't like figure out any other way of being. And all of a sudden, I am doing this, I'm taking this decision by myself, uh, throwing everything out and like, well, who knows what's gonna happen in the next month or the next week. But certainly that decision wasn't something that I took blindly, It is part of the education that somehow I was given as a student. And I have to mention Rene Francisco, because Rene at the time, when he was our professor, he always taught us in the sense that you have to always keep pushing your boundaries, your comfort zones. And somehow my decision is based on that. It is actually, it is a decision that is, I believe is an artwork for me as well. It was not an empty, decision. It was charged with a lot of information that I've been growing up with. And definitely landing at the San Francisco Art Institute, meeting you obviously first in New York, that brought me a different air to me. I still remember when we met. At the time, I was taking for the first time a digital camera, and I was, going everywhere with my camera, recording everything we did, and all that information, which I still keep. It was like the moment that ignite a new different way of seeing things, because you can draw with your camera. And that was something that for me was beautiful. And I remember arriving at the Art Institute, that most of the students, they were like dealing with new genres, your department and the new medias. And for me, that was very attractive. And the way you introduced me at that moment, for me, before the audience of the students, that I felt shaky and I didn't know exactly how articulate my words at the time. And that at that moment, I realized that there's a lot to do. I mean, there's still a lot way ahead that I have to achieve in order, more than success or anything than that, because it's not about success. In my case, I believe it's mostly about the compromise that you have with the art language, and to push the boundaries and bring ideas or solutions that might enrich the language of the arts. For me, is like the main goal. That's what I really cherish the most. And obviously, whatever decision that I take in that sense is something that obviously I'm going to be thinking and rethinking all the time until I achieve something that I think is valuable or not. But I have organized this sort of a talk with a selection of images that somehow can give you an idea of how I've been working all these years. They are not necessarily in orderly fashion. They are, sometimes I jump from one year to a previous one, and there is no linear. It's something, although it's some kind of increasing, it's not linear. And one of the things that for me, I have to say is I've been very lucky as well. The way I met you and the way you introduced me to the students and other people in San Francisco, for me, is something that I have been very lucky in that sense. So I see that I have had a lot of opportunities on these last 17 years. And I always carry this mantra with me. It's not only about the opportunities that you have, it's what you make with those opportunities, and in that sense, I never see an opportunity as a big one or a small one. I just see an opportunity. And departing from that perspective, you make it good or bad. And that for me is something that I always keep in mind. And on the other hand, well, I consider myself a very curious person, questioning everything that is in front of you. And that curiosity somehow, I think, is also what triggered most of my work. And then we have the aspect, which is something that propelled me to create all this body of work since the early days and it's the fact that for me, a space somehow dictates the rules. But once that you understand those rules, why not to change them? So for me, most of the work that you are going to see here is somehow that fight that I create with the spaces, and somehow the different points of view that you can exhaust toward a space, whether it's private, whether it's a surveillance space, whether it's a public space. And for me, it is important to exhaust, the views about what I'm dealing with. There is also the aspect of the fragment in architecture, which I've been working with for so many years. And you are going to see also the evolution of that, and how I can call an idea from the early days, bring it back to the current times, and try to rearrange that in order to create something different or new, at least for me. So in that sense, well, the image that you're looking at right now is the most recent project that I did here in Miami. I'm gonna talk about it at the end because it's the most recent one. But at the same time, it will lead me to, the next image, which is gonna be the first one, is one of the earliest work that I created in Havana. And somehow you are going to understand how that works for me. It's the year 2004. I already have like around a year or so of like departed from the project of Los Carpinteros. And, opportunities are starting to come. And the first one is organized by Espacio Aglutinador in Havana, run by Sandra Ceballos, an amazing artist and a person that really cares about the art scene in Havana. The only space at the time that was a private space run by artists that didn't exist before. They opened that idea in Cuba, and the day that they invite me to organize something for their space, I still remember what Sandra told me is, Alex, I want you to do something, but not necessarily a watercolor or a painting. I want you to do something that relates with other things. And for me, the fact that they were inviting me to this particular space, which is a very small, narrow space, which is half their house, half gallery. So they are sort of cramped in that little space, but you know, it's amazing all the work that she does there. For me, I wanted to reflect on this particular idea of what it means to share your space, your living space. In the case of Sandra Ceballos, how she offered her living space as a way to other artists to exhibit their work. So for me, what I come up with at the time was to create an additional space inside her space that for me will work as another gallery, which is extending the hand to bring other artists to exhibit inside. This obviously was very tiny, sort of like a dollhouse. Obviously, there is a sort of a critique also to the state of things at the time in Cuba, the lack of a space for exhibiting. But even if you're being given, like it was my case, something that small, it will produce more space. So this idea of producing a space within a space, for me became sort of like a way of doing. You will see in other works how that behaves in a different way, but somehow maintains the same idea. This project, which is also depart from this idea of questioning a space, this piece, which is from 2006, is titled White Corner. White Corner, it plays with different layers, but mainly for me, I have to say that this is a very, it's a sort of a self-portrait of the issues that I'm dealing with at the time. Remember, 2006 is like already 3 years that I have left Los Carpinteros, but I'm still dealing with this idea of who I am, this idea of identity. So I'm trying to recognize who I am, who am I, you know? So in that sense, interesting enough, I have this, at my apartment in Havana, I have this machete and a bat leaning on a wall. And I remember people coming to my house, they see those objects and they say, Alex, are you in a war or whatever? What's going on with you? You know, why you have those objects over there? And I said, well, those are gifts. Those are gifts that I received at some point in my life. One is a machete that I inherit from my great grandfather. And I still remember the story that he told me about the machete, that he inherited that at the same time from his great grandparent, who supposedly fought in the independence war. And so this machete have been in the family for, you know, many years. So when he handed that to me, it was a sort of like, he was handing a sort of a compromise, you know. And when I got the machete, he reminded me that the machete have had cut heads. And I was like, how come is that possible? I'm holding something that have killed people. And so, but for him was more about the idea of the subjectivity that surrounds the object in itself. And on the other hand, I have the bat, the baseball bat, that it was a gift from Dagoberto Rodriguez, my friend from Los Carpinteros. When I turned 30 years old, he gave me that bat. I didn't know exactly why that gave me the bat, but I was like, well, this is funny that I have two objects that somehow deals with the identity of my country. You know, the baseball, which is, you know, the main sport. And then you have the machete, we obviously resemble all the independence war and the idea of identity, you know, the nation, how to create this idea of the Cuban culture. And why not to put them in a fight? And for me, that was that moment in which I'm like, okay, let's do a fight with this. Let's try to establish a dialogue between the two. And in that dialogue, I will be sharing or shedding lights on my situation at that moment. So I did this installation, which is basically I built this corner made out of bricks, and then I projected on the two different sides the image, on one side holding the machete and on the other one the bat. And this idea of the ambush that only the spectator, the viewers are able to see, obviously is an invention, but this idea that you are able to see the whole picture of what's going on at that moment. So this is a piece that for me have been very important in what is the developing of my work. And that piece leads to surveillance, this idea of control that somehow not only relates to the control of yourself, but also the control of the society. This piece is the dates that you see there are 2003, 2005, and it's because it's for a reason. Let's say I designed this piece in 2003, and at the time I'm in Havana, and I have no idea how to build this particular piece. And I'm starting my new career, so I'm lacking of everything right now. So I called this friend of mine, which is Jose Raul Alonso. He's standing in front of a piece. Sadly, he died last year from a very long disease that he endured. So for me, it's important always to mention Jose Raul because he really ignited my career in a sense that I can achieve even more of what I was planning for myself. And when I called to Jose Raul, I explained him that I want to create this particular tree that it will be recording all the images of the surrounding, and at the same time, the projectors, I will set up projectors that all this information is going to be spread in all the walls that surrounds the piece. He loves the idea, and he says, I want to help you to make it possible. But I am in Cuba, unable to be part of the construction of this. So he embarked himself on trying to find fabricators here and there. And in the end, I called friends of mine who are fabricators in Los Angeles, put them in contact, and this piece, became a reality. But the fun part of this is that I didn't see this piece until 6 years later. So, and it's funny, because the piece was created, finally in 2005, and it went straight to a biennial in Tapei, and I wasn't unable to travel. And one of the things that I come up with, and it's interesting because at the time, obviously, Zoom or anything of these tools that we have now didn't exist. So I wanted to see what's going on where my piece is set, where it's being exhibited. But obviously, there was not a way to do it properly from Havana because we didn't even have internet access at the time. So there were like so many difficulties for me to really feel that piece was something that I designed. And it's interesting because this piece created the basis of what I'm doing today, in the sense that I can trust people to build my work somewhere around the world without seeing the piece, So I concentrated basically in the idea, in designing the object properly to make it work, and then obviously exhibit it. But what I have to say that the experience, the full experience with this piece is when it was exhibited in Portugal, that became like the final place for exhibit and of part of the collection of this particular work in 2007, I believe. And I still remember arriving to Elite's Foundation, which is the name of this institution in Portugal, and see the piece for the first time working and doing what I programmed initially in Havana to do. It was kind of strange because I'm looking at something that I produced, but I never was part of it in making it happen in the sense of like welding or painting or anything like that. So it's like all that have gone somehow with this particular piece. So that put me in the situation that I definitely want, in order for me to make possible many of my works living in Havana, that this could be a way to produce what I do, because you have the limitations of doing things in Havana, but then you can find people who can make it abroad, and you have to find the ways of how to manage and all that. And that require a lot of organization. And then I learned how to get organized, how to, to really control this production in a proper way. So it's been a learning curve with this particular piece, which led me to what you will see after. But definitely the Gardening of Mistrust, which is the title of this particular piece, it is one of those pieces that really challenge the notion of the space, in the sense that this is not a work that is there to be contemplated. This work is contemplating you and doing with the images that is recording a different scenario, creating a landscape where the images and the trees becomes a sort of like a futuristic landscape, which is something that we are experiencing more and more these days with the idea of surveillance and control. But let's go again to the idea, or for the first time, I don't know how to put it, with the idea of the fragment, which I mentioned initially when I was introducing my work in general. The idea of the fragment and how to organize a sort of a discourse based on the idea of a space using debris, dust, which is the title of this particular piece. Like Tony was mentioning initially, now I am in a way that I am not only living in Havana, I am attempting living in Madrid, traveling a lot more to New York, staying in Los Angeles for periods of time, passing through Miami. And all of a sudden, this idea of the space as we know, and for those who have lived in an island like we do, Cubans, the idea of the island, somehow when you are a kid, it is the world. There is nothing else than that. That's everything. And for me, I still remember that I grew up with the idea, and this is crazy. I think I was like 7 or 8 years old, that I trusted the idea that the world was flat. That, and even if you go to geographic classes and all that, geography classes and all that, I didn't get it, the idea that the world was round. So, but I'm telling the story because for me, the idea of like creating this notion of the world, it took some time until I realized that yes, the world is round and it has many people and it has many places and it's beautiful. And somehow recognizing that, I still remember I went crazy with the idea of going to New York, going to Madrid, and I started like picking little pieces of dust, debris from those places, and I put it in little boxes. And I started collecting all that information for many years. So I have this bunch of little pieces from everywhere and I don't know what to do with them. And I'm bringing them to Cuba, which is the fun part. I'm bringing them to Cuba every time that I go back to Cuba. And then, you know, I fly. It's kind of my portable world under my arms. And I still remember like trying to bring out of Cuba debris and soil out of Cuba. It became an issue. The Cuban government confiscated the soil, and they said that you cannot take soil out of the country. And I was like, what's the deal? This is just like nothing, you know? So it was sort of weird, no? And then I have all this information and I decide I want to do something with this. I want to create something with this. I don't know what. So I started ruminating on the idea of the punching bags as a way of understanding the idea of exercising, not obviously physically, but mentally. And these punching bags are, you know, made out of glass, transparent. They sort of like a glass window where you can see through and you can connect with the idea of a space through these pieces of dust, debris that are at the bottom of each one of them. So I made inscription on each punching bag referring to the place where that particular information comes from. You know, Havana, Los Angeles, San Francisco, you know, those places that have been exercising in my daily life somehow right now at the moment, because I'm traveling a lot. And so I created these sort of like columns that are hanging, you know, to sort of resemble also the idea of architecture, that somehow they design a sort of a path what I have been going through. So it's sort of the way they are set, they were, I mean, I'm showing here only 3 of them. In total, when I did the full exhibition, there were 8. They were exhibited in New York, in this sort of a tunnel gallery in Chelsea. And it was fun because, you know, you almost touched them because the space was pretty narrow. But the way they were set up in the gallery, it makes sort of sense, because you will see the first one that I, you know, encapsulated, and which was obviously Havana, and then so on, all the different cities. So you have this idea of trying to create a structure based on dust, how dust can become a material that from being ethereal, it becomes something more physical, that like the column, like the punching bag, that you can actually apprehend and try to control. So this idea of control, like I mentioned before with the Gardening of Mistrust, now has a different way of approach, you know, trying to control this idea of the places where you have been. Here, this particular piece, Perpetual Free Entrance, is a piece from 2006. And basically it's an invitation that I received, my first invitation to a museum show that I received in Spain. And when I was invited, the organizers told me, Alex, we would like you to create something big for the museum. And I said, well, I can create something big, but let me see what I can come up with. So my idea was precisely to establish somehow working or using the surveillance system of the museum as part of my installation. So what I did, all the recording cameras, the surveillance cameras of the museum that are pointing toward the entrances of the museum, I took all that information and put it in this sort of a stadium. And what you will see is people entering to the museum, but at the same time, they seems like they are entering to my work. So it's somehow to create a sort of like the environment of the museum in one single piece that it remains empty. The stadium, obviously, because there are no physical way to fill that with an image. with images, but the idea of the process of like trying to feel the work with the people that are entering and that not necessarily are going to visit my work, because this is a big museum. They probably didn't even see this particular work, but the piece at the same time contains them. So this, for me, that was the important thing. It is about to understand the space as a whole, you know, and this idea of the work that is not self-sufficient. It is more about to think about the space in general, and that for me was one important thing with this particular work. Back again to the idea of the fragment, that is something that I developed with this particular project, architectural elements, which is inspired at the same time in the work of Alejo Carpentier, The City of Columns, this book that he dedicated to Havana, and he beautifully explained how the architecture of Havana is made of so many different ways of representation of the columns, and how rich Havana became because of that, in the sense of architecture. And for me, there's always an idea that Havana, the Havana that I grew up with, is a Havana that was crumbling, that was most of the time is trying to survive. That is most of the time trying to survive. So there's a way of making architecture in Havana that for any Cuban that is familiar with the process, is about the idea of repurposing materials. This idea of, you know, you knock down a wall, but then you create a kitchen, or you knock down the kitchen and you create a bathroom using those same materials. So for me, that idea of repurposing materials is something that you know, you grow up with, and you definitely tend to work with the idea and represent that in a different way, you know. And obviously the fact that there are people behind those repurposing methods of creating a new architecture, I want also to represent that. So that's why this particular piece, which I use the brick, the paper, wood, the different components where you can create architecture, sort of like a column, or the Atlantic holding the column, it became sort of like my approach to this idea of repurposing elements of the architecture in order to produce new meaning. Here, this particular piece, which was created for the Prospect One Biennial in 2008, organized by Dan Cameron. Here, the idea of repurposing also plays a big role in my installation. At the moment, when Dan Cameron invited me, he told me that, you know, as Prospect One was lacking of funding and this and that, and you have to do things that are not definitely expensive or anything like that. And I come up with this idea that was using wood that was recovered from the Mississippi River. The piece in itself ideally represent, let's say, the shape of the Mississippi River in the United States, but is dedicated particularly to that event that happened in 2005 with the Katrina storm, and how the levees were broken and all the city got flooded. At least the French Quarter got flooded. And for me, that was a moment that, I mean, I was in Havana when that happened, but for any Cuban or here in Miami, we are very familiar with storms and the aftermath of the storms. And the poorly response of the US government toward this particular natural phenomena during in 2005 with the Katrina was something that I always wanted to reflect on that. So I created this piece, which is pretty, I mean, it's pretty big in the sense that but it represents sort of a bucket, you know, a wooden bucket. And the idea that is holding the entire shape of the Mississippi. It is funny because people thought that this piece was somehow something that you can participate with, and people started walking inside the bucket, and eventually the piece was destroyed, which for me was funny because I was trying to make a discourse based on the idea of controlling the levies and the viewers and the people who went to the biennial. They decide that they are, you know, they can be broken as well. So it broke, and the piece was exhibited also broken at the end of the biennial. So many of my works contain this idea of like the duality of the object that are fighting in order to create an entity that is restless. There is a fight over there. So for me, Pregón is one of those particular pieces that I created in 2009, but try to convey the idea of the space. You know, what the pianist feels when he's playing is that he has to carry his audience with him in order for the public to follow him. So this idea of like trying to, you know, to bring to the object the rest of the space is what inspired this particular piece. Let me jump into this one. Suicidal Landscape, which is also owes a lot to Pregón, because this duality that I work with in many objects that I do, it also plays this idea of the stabilization of the landscape. The landscape is on top of the sled, and at the same time you're looking at an object that is talking about moving. It's not about like the landscape itself, like it says, is in one place. So this idea of moving is something that for me have been very important for many years. Then I'll tell you with other pieces why it's so important. Orange Tree, which is a piece from, again, like the Gardening of Mistrust, 2003, 2005, 2003, 2010. And when I do this, is because the idea was projected at that time, which I thought that was important. But then because of the opportunities and money, it was produced later. And here, the idea of forgot the word, participation or not participation is, I always forget that word. Well, anyway, this idea of a communal object that invite everybody to participate, democratic is the word that I was trying to look after. This idea of creating an object that is democratic in his appearance, but at the same time, it negates this idea. It's based on breaking the rules. I mean, in the case of this particular piece, which is inspiring the basketball, it's titled Orange Tree. But to create an object that is democratic in the sense of this one, you have to break the rules that makes the sport possible. And by breaking those rules, in my belief, you bring chaos. And this idea of creating an object that simulates the idea of democratization, but at the same time brings the idea of chaos. There are no rules. There are no ways to do the ball. There are no ways to ups and down the balls. And then you have the balls that are stick on this at the bottom, like fruits that have fallen from the tree, but you are unable to work with them. You are not able to play with them. So it brings sort of like a contradiction to the object about the possibility of participation, but at the same time, it totally denies you to do it. So I think that being at that stage is a sort of a weird situation that it creates, and that leads to the idea of, you know, public sculpture and the idea that it needs to really bring joy in participation. And no, there is no interest in this particular case on bringing that. It's totally the opposite, is to think about the situation rather than participate in the physical way. Black Sun is a project that I created back in 2010. It was exhibited first in Thessaloniki in Greece, but the actual, you know, wow moment was in New York when I first exhibited this in 2010 in March during the Armory Art Fair is happening. This piece is being exhibited. But there is one thing that I tried also to exhaust. Every presentation or public project that I do, it relates in many cases with the context that you're living in. And in this particular case, the context that we are living in 2010 is 2 years after the recent economic crisis that we are living. Things went like really awful. And I still remember, I still living in Spain, and the crisis is like hitting really hard every aspect of our lives. And I received the invitation to exhibit this particular piece in Times Square. And I was given the opportunity to choose which a screen to use. And I chose the NASDAQ because one of the things that this particular piece has is the Black Sun. It's a sort of like a wrecking ball that works as a pendulum, and it knocks the surface where it's projected and bounce back. So there is no real damage or anything on the surface of where the piece is projected. But there's one thing that it calls the attention on the building that is projected. So somehow it's like knocking the door on that particular institution and looking at them, you know, and obviously as a way of questioning, as a way of just looking the architecture, you know, it depends on your will. But at least my idea was to present a video installation that it calls the attention where it's projected. The City That Stopped Dancing is a project for from 2011. Sorry that I placed the wrong date. I was invited to along with other Cuban artists to the first Venice Biennial Pavilion, and when I come up with this idea, which is the City That Stopped Dancing, that refers to 3 different periods of the architecture and the history of Cuba, starting with the Bacardi building, that it was built in the late 20s, early 30s. Then you have the Someillan building that is built in the late 50s, 57, if I'm not wrong. And then you have the Russian embassy built in the late 70s in Havana. So you have 3 periods in the architecture that leads to the idea of failures or success. And I wanted definitely to deal with those issues in a fun way. And I come up with the idea of creating these spinning tops that at the top you put the tower of each of those buildings. And the idea that the city, obviously through these different moments, can fail, but at the same time, it can succeed. It depends on you. You are the one who make things work or not. So I was trying to create a work here that is not pessimistic at all. It is definitely a work that it tries to bring some joy, but at the same time, it recognizes that failure is part of the human existence, you know. So here we are already in 2013. I was given an extraordinary opportunity at that year of being exhibiting my work, Park Avenue. And this is definitely a moment which the idea of working with architecture, as I was doing until now, it will have a different approach and also a different audience, a larger audience. For the first time, I'm doing a work that is going to be seen for thousands of people, not only physically at the site, but also because of the PR is also the idea is going to travel abroad and going to hit other places. And Park Avenue project initially was a big question for me. I understood that what was going on this particular avenue, and previous artists have been exhibiting there, some of them great projects, some of them not such great projects, but at the same time, it was an opportunity that was given to me, and what to do on Park Avenue. I'm not living in New York. I'm moving to New York that very same year, but the project was designed before. But I'm in this city, which we all know, and you create a particular bond with the city. And obviously architecture, as I remember, when you arrive to New York for the first time, and I think that for anyone who arrived to that city for the first time might be feeling the same, but you feel meaningless. You know, the structures are so powerful, so enormous, so gigantic that you feel, you know, nothing. And somehow for me, this gradually started to change, because when you start living in New York, then those structures start not being part of the landscape. Then you visit them, you exchange experiencing in those buildings, and somehow you start controlling a situation. And that's how I felt with this particular project. I wanted to bring that experience, that particular experience of someone who came to the city, and somehow someone who took the city for himself in some way. And it's my belief that, for instance, in architecture, buildings or any structure, they are more obviously than the structure itself. They represent obviously power, they represent real estate, money, they represent or they suffer the changes of weather, the changes in the structure. And for me, this idea that there are so many aspects that you have to take into account when you are dealing with architecture, that to show that might be a very interesting idea. And in the case of the piece that you're looking at, which is the Cherry Netherland, I think the Cherry Netherland is on Fifth Avenue on 49 or something like that. It is obviously a very well-known building in New York. And I wanted to deal with the idea of New York as a city in itself, the idea that devours itself in order to create a new city. This idea of this circularity of the idea of the process of remaking the city daily is something that inspired me to create this. And it's obviously based on this ancient idea of the Euroboro, which is the snake that bites its own tail. This idea of the eternal, the time as something that comes back constantly. And I created, and I'm sorry that I just chose two images here, because it's not, this is going to be endless talk. Both of them are related to that, but I also created spinning tops, very similar to the ones that I exhibited in Venice. But in this case, they were actually structures that you can move with your hands. So while doing this project, we recorded most of the project. When Carlos Salom, as a filmmaker, he did a beautiful documentary, which Tony is part of. And there is a moment in the documentary, and I can send you the link after if the students want to see the documentary on this particular project. But there's one moment in which there is a kid like turning the spinning top with his little hands. And that for me was very important, because that was somehow my basic idea, is to bring down those structures, put it in the hands of people, and they can do whatever with them. If they want to do, skating, they want to do whatever with those structures. And they in fact did, not here in this setting, but then we exhibit the pieces downtown, and people use them like skating places and all that. And that was beautiful to me. This idea of using the city and doing with it whatever you want to do. This project is a moment in which I'm like trying to modulate a different approach. I have done Park Avenue, and I don't want people to relate my work to someone who bends buildings, but someone who is constantly thinking in how to control a space, how to control architecture, and create something meaningful out of it. In this particular piece, and forgive me that I didn't include an image that also shows a watercolor that is also part of the installation. But here there is a moment in which that idea of the fragment that I've been dealing with dust, that I've been dealing with architectural elements, here start playing a different role. If you see those dots, black dots that are on top of the surface, well, the surface for me, it represents a plowed field. It is a space. And those black dots are actually a photograph of liquids, whether it's water, honey, urine, acid, that I set it up on top of that. And dealing with this idea of I forgot the word right now, of fertility, what it means fertility. Fertility is beyond the idea of like water and soil, but it's idea of putting situations together in order to create something different. So for me, it's idea of creating a sculpture that is more about dealing with the idea of creating a space that is trying to bring something different, something new out of it. This idea of fertility by putting photography and a sculpture together is something that for me was very important in this particular piece. Then we are here on this big project that I did back in 2006 in Coachella. And again, the idea of Katrina, which is Mississippi Bucket, comes back to this particular event. I have been invited to Coachella. This is, as you know, is a very important music festival, but it's a place that mostly young people go. And the idea of bringing a project that deal with the recent history of the United States, and in the particular, particularly what happened with Katrina storm in New Orleans, was, I think, very important for me to bring to an audience that might not know precisely what happened at that time, but might enjoy the idea of being under the shadow of these objects that reflect on this particular moment, and somehow bring the sense of community, bring the sense of understanding, and being socially aware of what's going on with your surroundings. So it's mostly to bring that idea to play a role into a music festival that doesn't necessarily invite to think on situations like this one, but Coachella wanted to bring something like that to the polo field. That is a place where this happened. And it's funny because the LA Times, when they did the review on Coachella, the headline says, "Is Coachella turning political?" as a question. And that is in part because of the approach that Katrina Chair had at the time when I exhibited at the Coachella Festival. More recently, I've been working with ideas that are, they somehow bring several elements that I've been using in the past, and now I want to create something that invites or create an environment in order to invite other artists to collaborate with me. So I have created this series, and this is the first one that I have done, that is titled Agora, resembling this idea of the ancient agora as a place of meeting and the place of for theater. and the screen that is at the bottom of the piece, it is just a regular TV screen, but which I use to invite other artists to exhibit their work, whether it's in relation to the structure that I have created or not. But it becomes a place for other artists to exhibit whatever they have. This is the first thing that the first time that I have done it. I collaborated with this musician Pavel Urquiza last year, and it was a very beautiful moment for me. This idea of bringing back collaboration in that sense, in a way that I practiced collaboration 17 years before, and so that's it. More recently, the idea of the fragment is evolutioning, and I'm creating this series of, which by the way have been produced in Auckland with Magnolia Editions, which are dear friends, and they have been very helpful in producing this series of works. And here, these are a photograph of corners of buildings in Havana, which I have photoshopped and created in a way that they look like masks or faces in order to bring or to show the identity of the neighborhood or neighborhoods in Havana. So most of these images come from different neighborhoods, and they get together in this particular entity. The piece in the center is a tapestry, and the way that I arrived to the conclusion of the tapestry is because of a yarn. This idea how the yarn connects all the corners that for me, I think, or I thought that was very important in order to produce an object that is concise in that sense, although it's created with different moments of architecture. This is another example of this particular work. The ones on the right are printed on wood, and the ones on the left is also woven. It was woven in Kathmandu. And more recently, which is the image that I initially started, is the Dreaming with Lion, which is the project that I just inaugurated last week, and it was took down on Monday this week. And this is the most recent experience that I have had, and this idea that also contains the experience of that we have been living in the recent month with the COVID, and this idea of being unable to go outside and share. When I received the invitation from Faena, which is an amazing institution here in Miami, who supports artists locally and internationally, they invite me to create something for the beach, and I have never done anything like that. And for me, this idea of working in the space of the beach, I immediately brought into my mind ideas in relation to what we are experiencing and books that I have read in the past. And in this case, is the book The Old Man and the Sea, that particularly for Cubans, it is a book that we cherish a lot, especially because it tells a beautiful story in a beautiful place like Cohimac. And the idea of resilience, the idea of surviving a difficult moment like we are right now experiencing, was something that triggered for me the idea of creating this particular piece by rearranging the landscape of the beach. In this particular case, I'm using beach towels. I'm using the structures of the shelves, something that you will find definitely at the beach, elements that you will find at the beach, and repurpose or rearrange that into this structure that is sort of a circle that is broken in the middle. So you can come from the hotel toward the beach with no interruption, but at the same time, if you stop in the middle of that, you will read, well, in this case, backwards, but you have to go outside to read the text properly. And these are two phrases that are taken directly from the book, and especially that moment in which Santiago, which is the main character of the book, is dealing with the idea of survival when he's fighting with the sharks, trying to keep the marlin safe to the shore. But finally, the marlin is eaten by the sharks, and he somehow is a story of all this situation. And those soliloquy that he has at the time when he's deep at the sea are these sentences or paragraphs that I have used in order to connect with the public or the viewers at the beach to understand the landscape as a larger idea. It's not only what's going on at that specific place, but it's something that it pretends to understand what's going on in our life today. And with this particular project, which is the reason, I think I'm done. And this is the final picture that it shows, you know, what is next, I don't know. But, you know, this is briefly, you know, a little bit about what I do and my ideas. I'm open now to questions if you have any.
Hauke.
Que voila. Whoa!
Hey.
Oh my God. That is a beautiful surprise.
I look the same, right?
How you
Thank
doing?
you. It was so beautiful and generous. And I love that you ended with an image of water and an island, and you're referencing what it was like to grow up on an island and thinking that the world was flat. And I'm really struck by the way that your work is it's not flat. It's well, a lot of circularity, a lot of you know, framing from like an ocular point of view. I'm wondering if you can talk about how that early sort of belief or disbelief that the world could be round maybe has sunk in a little bit and informed your work, or am I just wanting that to be this poetic to resonate in a poetic way? But
no, absolutely, you know, it's we're going back, you know, I'm not coming from Havana, I'm coming from Trinidad. It's a little town in the middle of the island, and where I got the notion of the world is flat, because that was the most important thing in the world for me, Trinidad. And when I left Trinidad, that I went to start living in Havana for the first time, and I have to say frankly, when I arrived to Havana, I thought that I arrived to New York, because the city was so magnificent, so special, so dynamic. There was so much thing going on in Havana that I felt that I arrived to New York. So when I arrived to New York, I already had that experience a little bit in my mind in Havana. So meaning that the circularity that you are talking on is precisely something that is sort of my evolution, recognizing that is not about the situation that you are surrounded with, but the larger one. To understand that in a broader way, I think is important, especially because as human, you are more toward understanding little things in a poetical way. You are more sensitive. You learn to be more sensitive because you understand that it's not only about your situation. There are many people, there are many different situations, and you are trying to understand all that and trying to, one of the things that I have to explain when I'm doing my work is I'm always trying to be a better person. And the way to educate myself is by creating what I do. Because one of the things that for instance, I do is when I embark in creating a project, you have to read a lot, you have to study a lot, you have to educate yourself. And for me, every new work is a pretext in order to learn more. So I'm learning more, but not because I want to be wiser or anything, because I want to share that after, my conclusions, what I do, what I create, why I did this, why I did that. And somehow bring, obviously, a discussion or not. There are issues that are, you can create discussion. There are issues that you're not, because they are so personal, so intimate that sometimes they don't really provoke that beyond the fact that for you as a person, it creates, anxiety and create things that you only can explain to yourself. But thank you for bringing that idea of the circularity, because definitely for me, it's a sort of a learning curve, the way I understand from coming from the flat to coming to the round and to understand things as a whole.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
So good to see you, Haka.
Oh, God. Oye, Tony, tremenda mudada.
Ale, can I talk?
Yes, absolutely, Sandrita.
I really enjoyed so much this, and I appreciate so much that you are here and show all your work. And I think it's so good for every student here to see. And I'm wondering if you can explain more your process in the practical way, how you get from these all wonderful ideas to produce the pieces, because I think that's so important and something that you have developed so well in your career, no? And
yeah, it's crazy because it seems like I have a book, but I don't. Because every situation is different. But at least I've been able to create somehow a way to understand that. And one of those methods that I have achieved or arrived or created is the fact that, for instance, you saw the idea of being in Havana and creating the Gardening of Mistrust, trusting someone from abroad that I don't know personally, but someone who will create something that in the end I will see 4 or 5 years later, and I will say, wow, this is what I did, and they did it good. Mm-hmm. And by the time you are meeting more and more people, at least the way I establish a dialogue with them that I never ended, even when I finish a work relationship with them. Mm-hmm. I keep like asking if they have achieved new techniques, they are developing something new. It is something that for me is in the daily basis that I practice that. And what I created is a sort of like a network of people in Madrid, in New York, in Los Angeles, in Miami, in Havana, that somehow at some point you try to connect them all by introducing them to the other one. Well, you should meet this guy because they do this or they do that. And so sort of creating a group of people with similar interests that I always can approach them when I need them. And for instance, production in many cases is really expensive. You have to do dribbles in order to keep that because it's difficult. But of course, you have the plan, you develop the plan A, the B, the C, the D, it's just like you got the full rainbow of situation. And sometimes what I do is like I send to a particular fabricator that can do little things to create one single part of the entire installation. They don't build the entire thing. And you are creating a balance. At least I create a balance between collaborations, and even friends who are. I have, for instance, a friend who is a designer in Madrid. He's graduate from design, but he also do photography. But he started learning carpentry because he likes it. And then I called him once, hey, Rafa, do you think that you can do this? And he said, of course I can do that. And, it's something that for me, it's not about going to the top, straight to the top. It is about also working what's going around you. Because I believe we all develop certain skills at some point. And for me, is trying to discover that skill on that particular individual and try to start a collaboration. And that is important. you have to be willing to collaborate in that sense. It's not only because sometimes you can even create works that they will not be expensive, but it's more about the experience. You know, you are learning all the time. You're learning all the time, and I love to learn new things all the time. And definitely for me, it's about creating this network of people who can do things. It's like going into, I don't know, Amazon, and and then you pick the things that you like or you're interested. And for me, it's something that I work in the daily basis. I keep you know, constant contact with these people all the time for a question, for whatever. But it's something that you have to practice daily. At least that's what I do.
Thank you, Haka.
Questions.
Do you believe the world is flat?
Not anymore. Some
I had
people
to
try
ask.
to make it flat. Some people try to make it flat, definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah, by you know, by a single situation, you know, everything that is not trying to get the community around you is a flat earther believer, you know.
Yeah, I agree, Haka. I think that in a horizontal sense, the world is flat. And I
Yeah,
think, you know, to hear you talk about networking and collaborating, it is a horizontal relationship, you know. So in that sense, it's maybe metaphorical.
right.
Listen, I wanted to ask you something. First of all, I think Zaina is really jealous about that sunset.
Don't rub it in, Tony. Oh my God. I'm like, how? Yeah.
Or maybe it was a sunrise. I'm not sure. Yeah, that's the east. So that's the sunrise.
I want to be right there.
I know you do. I know you do. The other thing is like, how do you, this is like maybe could be like a little bit of a tough question, but that's my job. How do
Yeah.
you reconcile the present condition that we're living through with this beautiful, you know, like me saying to Zaina, look how beautiful that is, you know, towels, beach, leisure, like escape, go to the beach, forget your problems. How do you reconcile those things? And,
Yeah,
and number two, are you aware? I understand very well how that particular piece, novel, Old Man and the Sea, is important to Cubans.
hmm
But this is not Cuba.
I know. No,
And,
absolutely.
and then, you know, and it's not Miami, it's Miami Beach. So this kind of like little nitpicking things, I'm wondering if you understand the legacy of the artist himself and what Hemingway represents. Can you
Absolutely.
address that for?
Absolutely. No, you know, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to talk about the figure of Ernest Hemingway because it's very a very complicated one, and it has
that's,
its ups and
that's
downs.
probably enough for me. That's probably enough. I just wanted you to acknowledge. I was curious if you
No,
you
absolutely,
understand
absolutely.
that or not,
No, absolutely.
or if
It's
it was a naive thing. That's
no,
all.
no, not at all, not at all.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Because it's also part of the contemporary landscape, you know, and how we understand.
Absolutely. I'm being politically correct these days is complicated. It's complicated, and it's funny because the Financial Times, when they did the review on the project, they started
I saw it.
actually questioning the figure of Ernest Hemingway, and I knew that this could happen, obviously, and to understand that with the pattern that we are living in today, obviously it brings a lot of questioning about him as a figure. I was focusing on the drama that he chose in literature and the idea of the human condition, basically. Obviously, you cannot get rid of the author. It's important in his presence.
Sure, Alex. Another thing is that some of the reviews or theories or critics about this particular event within the novel, within the book, within the narrative,
Mm-hmm.
have to do with uh, his love of this macho,
Absolute culture.
absurd, like the male doing bullfighting,
Right.
big hunting, killing big animals, like which it's also something interesting about why didn't Santiago just cut the line off and let the marlin go?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So for someone that I have like been, I mean, I would hate to say scholar, but I have really read Hemingway.
Absolutely. I mean, but he precisely wanted to show off, I did the big thing. I captured the largest fish.
Interesting things about that particular moment itself in relation to what we're going through, which is cut the line, let the marlin go back home, and maybe get some little fish and cook them for dinner.
Right, right. No, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I think is the project in itself, it is definitely mostly about this idea of the circular space, a place for gathering, a sort of like reminding you a library. There are so many elements that you have in addition to the fact that I'm using the literature as a way to represent my work, but there is a structure in itself of what's going on in the beach, what's going on in Miami Beach, the towels, the shelves, the sand, and the idea of creating this sort of like a amphitheater or a space where you will bring people to gather in a moment that people are not allowed to gather. So there are like elements that invites beyond the fact of what you can read on those towels or not, because it is just the idea of the possibility. It's giving to people the possibility that you can create with the elements that you find in the beach, whatever you want. It is mostly about that. I come up with that idea of Ernest Hemingway because it connects with the idea of the landscape of the sea. It is to understand, like I've been saying, that the idea of the whole, to understand that as a whole. And I think there are elements that invites to understand the piece in different layers if you want to go beyond the idea of the words and the idea of the literature. I think there are many elements in addition that you can play with. And those are, for me, as important as the words that I have used for that particular project.
No, I agree. Very provocative. Very provocative. And I really wanted one of those towels.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say I'm gonna give you one because everyone here is gonna say I want one too.
I was gonna ask you, Alex, can I get one too? Can I get two?
Alex, this has been like really incredibly beautiful, challenging, and amazing. And I want to like really thank you so much for taking the time to share your work and all these complicated issues. And I think you deal with a lot of complicated, and I think that's why I love your work so much, because
Thank you,
they
Tony.
are really complicated narratives, and it makes us question things and think about things, complicated things, particularly this one.
Yeah,
And I myself, that's what I like in art, you know. So I like the challenge to provoke and even do things that are not correct,
yeah, yeah.
and to think about.
No, I mean the fact that you're not allowed to say certain things, that doesn't mean
Yeah,
that you cannot say it.
exactly,
You
exactly. And I think culturally, to understand what it means to Cubans versus what Hemingway means to American feminists.
Right, right. No, absolutely.
It's like then there's another layer to the whole thing,
Yeah,
and I appreciate you doing that, whether you did it intentionally or not. I still think that is there, and it was complicated, to be honest with you,
no,
but
I know. I know
and
that I
but
was jumping into the pool and see what's going on. It was like,
I mean,
yeah,
I mean, that perspective is that way. If you turn the camera around and we see that perspective the other way, is it's called Millionaires Row.
yeah, yeah,
So I mean, I'm here now, and I can deconstruct all of these like issues that are happening within the environment and the landscape as well.
right,
And to
right.
tell you
Oh,
that,
I mean, it's the case when I showed this black sun against the Nasdaq building. Well, people were looking at sort of a wrecking ball that is hitting the building. No. This is questioning this particular institution because somehow they drove us into this horrible financial situation in 2008.
I, I I agree with you 100%. And that's I didn't want to bring it up as a negative feedback, but more
No, absolutely
as
no,
an
no.
observation of the all the layers of the complicated narrative that you like really bring to your work, you know. And I think that it deserves to be open for a dialogue, and I wish that people would question and talk more about that because it's taken out of context.
Mhm.
Again, what Hemingway means to La Floridita with that statue there and the
Right.
tourist is nothing to do with right here.
No, not at all. There are two
You know
different. I
what I
mean,
mean? That romanticizing, that macho thing, nothing
right,
to do with right here.
right.
So I just wanted to bring that up because that's me.
And I love it.
Sorry, lo siento.
No. It's I still remember when I invited you to do push-ups with that short. You told
Made
me,
me look like a
why?
porn star.
Why? I said, because I think it's funny.
This guy asked me to put on a pair of Hawaiian shorts, and I left my socks on, and then we were doing push-ups in Studio 10 at the Art Institute, and he made a video that I'm incredibly embarrassed about, and he keeps showing it.
I want to see it. You should have put that in the lecture.
I told him, yeah,
Not too late.
I didn't want to embarrass Tony.
And I was so out of shape, I couldn't even do 5 push-ups, okay? I have a belly, I'm like, it's embarrassing, man. So, all right, you're consistent. uh, Jennifer, anything you have to wrap it up with?
This has just been so special. And I think for us, what a way to end this semester, you know, it's
Yeah.
broadened our vista when we could all use a little bit of that, right? Because we're staring at the same, you know, what's the word in Spanish for screen? Padilla.
No pantalla.
Pantalla. Okay, sorry. But like really just I think we all needed this. But just the evolution of your work to see after all these years is just really special. So thank you. You're very generous. I want to say that too.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. It has been a beautiful opportunity for me, especially 17 years later. And look at us doing Zoom instead of like being at the amphitheater. And but this is, you know, the show must go on in whichever way. But we're still here. We're still fighting. We're still, you know, dealing with the sharks and trying to make our best, I believe.
Yeah, I'm gonna cut the Marlins line off.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
I'm gonna then come home and just like go to Puerto Sagua.
Relax.
Alex, it's beautiful, man. Love you so much.
So you guys, and well, what can I say? Thank you so much for this opportunity. And
one last little thing that I wanted to say. Maybe it was 2000, 2001 or something, that I invited Los Carpinteros, and they had an exhibition in the
yeah,
McBean
that 2001. Yeah,
2001.
2000.
And Dago, one of the members of the collective Los Carpinteros, cooked lunch in the cafeteria of the school, and it was incredible. So I just miss those moments,
Yeah,
and that bridge that we attempted to build, and hopefully we can rebuild it again.
yeah. Let's hope so. Yeah.
Now more than ever,
Now more
with
than
all the shit that Havana and their young artists are going through.
yeah.
And I just want to say
Absolutely.
that
Absolutely.
it's
Absolutely.
really important to keep building that bridge
Absolutely.
and keep the dialogue. You know, keep the dialogue.
Keep the dialogue.
People,
Absolutely.
that's what I've been trying to do for 21 years now.
Yeah.
Just
I am-
dialogue. So now more than ever. Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Reina, gracias, Sandri, Jennifer,
Yep.
Tonito. Okay, let's. How do I get out of here?
I'll get you out. You out there. You.
Okay, guys.
Ciao.
Thank
Ciao.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.